What have you been up to?
Shit, man, just trying to finish a couple new musical projects. Me and Serp are doing an album, and we're almost done with that. And then, got all these battle shit happening, and which I'm not really excited about, but that's basically seems to be the way to get the most money right now.
Are you and Serp both rapping on the project, or is he producing and you're rapping?
I'm mainly rapping, but he's featured on a couple tracks, and then he produced all the songs.
How long have you guys been working on that?
We started 3 weeks ago, and we're almost finished. And that was what our whole thing was, just because we've been writing together for 7 years, but we never do anything with the shit. We just record dope shit and never release it. So I'm let's just get in real quick and fucking knock out a record in a couple weeks.
Really fast?
Yeah.
What's up with the battle shit? Are you trying to ease out of it slowly, or are you still into it?
I mean, I enjoy doing it. It's just I just kind of realized early on that I didn't have aspirations to be the best battle rapper in the world. So I kind of see other than getting paid for it, it's what's the point really? If I wasn't getting paid, I wouldn't be doing it. So it's kind of this trap, because the battles pay more than shows typically. And so it's I got 2 battles in 1 week in March, and I'm going to make more money than I would at playing 3 shows anywhere else. So it's it's just kind of trap, Plus, I'm not really excited about any of the people I battle, and I don't get that excitement about it. Because if you're battling someone dope, you're afraid that they're gonna win, and if you're battling someone that's fucking sucks, it's just So I think it's cool to find that kind of middle ground. But
are you still excited about making music?
Yeah, that's the only thing that still really gives me any motivation. Yeah. I think especially when you write something good, it's if I write something cool for a battle, I don't get that same oh man, this is so tight. It's gonna be a battle doesn't have the replay value of a song, and that's writing a good battle and having people. The only place you're gonna get commended for that is at a battle, where some fan is oh man, that line you had against Absurd was so tight. And with music, it's people are still sending me messages about songs I wrote 5 years ago, or even shit that I didn't even know they heard. And they're yo, that song changed my life, or that song reminds me of me and my girlfriend. Every time I hear that song, it's and that's the shit that I think as an artist, that's the biggest compliment you can get,
It's just a lot more gratifying creatively than, yo, man, you're really good at calling that guy a faggot.
Yeah, it's we're entertainers, but there's also such a dark side to music where it's we'd be doing this if we weren't entertaining anyone either. That's what people don't understand. Is if there wasn't an audience, the artist is still alone somewhere in a studio creating. Because I was writing music way before anyone was listening to it. And I'll be writing music until, hopefully until I'm not inspired to, And I've always thought pain is the biggest motivator. So it's I think to relate to people on that level, all of my favorite artists are people that were able to do that.
So music is a catharsis for you?
Absolutely.
That's how you work through shit?
Yeah.
What other projects are you working on besides the Serp shit?
That's pretty much it. I mean, I got a couple other producers I'm working with. Me and this dude Nick Nicotine, who's done a lot of work with Little Debbie and Riff Raff and Dirt Nasty, Andre Legacy and all those dudes. We got 3 songs into an EP that we're working on.
He did the Nito beat, right?
Yeah, that's his claim to fame.
Yeah,
he's
yeah. No, that beat's hard.
He's the producer of Nito. It's what it says on his. But if you produce a song that gets 2 million views on YouTube, then
you deserve some shine.
You should say I produced that song in your bio on Twitter. But he's got in my opinion, that wasn't even his tightest beat. He's a real talented producer. And he's doing a bunch of shit with all those guys. And we had met and started doing a few songs, and then we're probably do a couple more and put out an EP. Nice. So that's cool.
How long have you been making music?
I started really rapping I think it was 96. And you know, just freestyling with the homies or whatever. And I didn't start recording till like 97. And, but I wasn't really interested in, I was so like, I was in that like honeymoon period with rap where it was like, I wasn't even caring about recording.
You just write all the time. I feel like when you first start rapping, it's like, man, you're just writing no matter where the fuck you're at, and you don't care if you have a beat to listen to. It's just like you just want to get shit off.
Yeah, and that was a trip, writing with no beat back in, like, I didn't write to a beat for like 10 years. Not knowing how to count bars or anything, like going to a studio and they're like, do a 16, and I'm like, what? And I'd literally just rap until the beat changes, and then put like a line and be like, all right, that's... Because I would write no structure, no anything, no chorus, just like pages and pages, and then try and fit it all together. And I didn't even have an interest in like writing songs either. I just was like, just writing and, you know, freestyling all the time. And that lasted for like a really long time. Like that was like 3 years.
Who were the homies that you started with?
They were all kids that I went to high school with.
Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Harvard Westlake. It's like a really rich private school in Studio City.
Is that where you're from originally?
No, I'm from Hollywood.
What brought your folks out to Hollywood?
Well, I was born in New York, and my dad was working for this magazine. My parents are writers, and you know, he had to move out here for business. So me and my two brothers moved out here with my mom and dad when we were young. I think I was about 4.
Oh, so you just grew up in Hollywood.
Yeah. Like we lived in Venice for a minute, and then we moved basically to Melrose and Highland. So I grew up on Melrose from the time I was like 5 years old.
What's it like growing up in that neighborhood?
It's interesting, man, because like the area is called Hancock Park. And, you know, a lot of people have actually like criticized me because they're like, oh, you're from Hancock Park. You're a rich kid from Hancock Park. And Hancock Park is this like very interesting area because it is a really affluent neighborhood. It's like predominantly like Orthodox Jewish. Now it's a lot of like white people or whatever. I mean, not that Jews aren't white, but you know what I'm saying, like waspy types. But it's surrounded by LA. Like it's right in the middle of everything. So while you are growing up in a really nice area, you might know your neighbors, etc.
You can walk a couple blocks and get in some trouble.
I mean, you know, like you could literally, like when we were skating on Melrose, back in the day, you used to get jacked. Cars still get broken into. I'm not saying it's like growing up in a rough neighborhood by any means, but you're in the city. And that's why I think a lot of the people I knew coming from that area still ended up gravitating towards the kind of street culture, like graffiti art, skateboarding, and music, because Melrose is like, that was the shit when I was coming up, and that was it. Every day after school, we'd go to Melrose, and that's where you smoke weed and go to Beat Nonstop, listen to music, and see all the graffiti kids, skateboarders, and, you know, the gang members here and there, and, you know, you just kind of got that influence still in your life. You weren't, like, off protected entirely in the little bubble, you know?
Beyond that, I mean, in the 80s were a decadent time, and being in Hollywood, it's like even the people that were doing well were probably getting into some shit too, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was a trip. Also, like, going to private high school was like, you know, those kids all had money. And, like, that was, like, there's a big, I think sometimes that's even more of a disadvantage because they could do whatever they wanted, you know. And these kids, like, I thought I was poor going to school with these kids because these kids were getting, like, fucking brand new Yukon trucks when they turned 16. And I got, like, my uncle's Volvo, and I was like, I felt like I was poor because, you know, and it was like, it took me going out, like leaving California to realize like how prosperous my family had been, you know, because when you grow up in this environment, it's like the super rich. If that's who you're surrounded by, it's easy to feel like less than, you know, you're like, fuck, man. And all those kids could buy drugs and fucking, you know, it was like everywhere I went, kids were fucking getting active. It didn't really matter, especially in that time. It was like the mid-90s, you know, super rave culture and fucking just partying and, like, you know, just fucking was this perfect storm of chaos.
What magazine was your dad writing for?
The Economist.
Oh, The Economist. Yeah. No kidding. Is he still writing?
He was actually running their advertising department on the West Coast, and he worked for them for 30 years, and then they just laid him off like this year. And then my mom wrote for television and movies.
Did she write anything that we would know?
She was really like working with Saban Entertainment during the whole like Power Ranger era. So everything like post Power Rangers, like VR Troopers, Big Bad Beetleborgs, Masked Rider, Mystic Knights. She was like a staff writer for Saban Entertainment. Crazy. And she used to write like soap operas and shit. So
my mom is probably a huge fan.
Why?
My mom loves soap operas.
Oh, yeah. She did this show called Santa Barbara.
I'm not bullshitting you when I say this. That was literally my mom and my grandmother's favorite fucking show. There's probably still VHSs in my house of that show.
Yeah, she wrote for that for like a few years.
That's crazy. I'm going to tell my mom that. She will flip out. So, yeah, growing up around Hollywood as a little skate rat, like what kind of trouble were you getting into at a young age?
I mean, initially, everything was cool, I think, through like probably like 6th, 7th grade. And then...
Were you playing sports and stuff before that?
No, I was like a real weak kid. Like I wasn't like a talented athlete or anything. And that's like, I think a lot of kids ended up skateboarding, which is really weird because skateboarding is actually like really athletic, especially today. Now it's like a like legitimized like Olympic sport and shit. Like, but back in the day, if you couldn't play sports,
it was some misfit shit.
Yeah, it was like, I'm gonna go skateboard, fuck it, you know? And, I just started skating and fucking, you know, then it kind of just was like the skater kids that I hang out with smoke weed. You know, they're smoking weed with my older brother or whatever. And early on, the trouble wasn't really there. It was just like, I mean, we got arrested one time, I think, on a Halloween for like assaulting someone. And
how old were you when that happened?
I was like 12. And like, it sucked. Like my homeboy like hit this chick in the face and like broke her jaw. And then her dad, like, kidnapped me.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, it was, like, this whole big thing, especially in that neighborhood. And the ironic thing is, like, now my son's kindergarten teacher is, like, related to the dude who kidnapped me. And fucking, so, like, when I go to, like, take my son to school, I look at her and I'm like...
How'd you guys figure out that relation?
Or they had the same last name. Because, like, in order to avoid getting prosecuted for the assault, like... And I'll go on the record saying, like, I didn't hit the chick. You know, like, my homeboy... The chick was, like, hitting me, and I was a small kid. I hadn't even, like, gone through puberty yet. And this chick was, like, a big girl. And she was swinging on me. And then my homie ran up and just cracked her jaw. And fucking, we all just ran, and then her dad came through and, like, fucking caught me and, like, put me in the back of his car, and, like, it was crazy. And then fucking, to avoid the prosecution for the assault, we pressed charges for the kidnapping.
Wow.
And so we reached a deal out of court where it was like, if you don't press charges on my homie, then we're not going to fucking take you out for the kidnapping, you know? So
was that your first time being involved in the court system and stuff?
Yeah, and it was crazy. I mean, we were at this private school and had like LAPD detectives like showed up and they're like, called me in the office. And I don't think this school had ever seen anything like that. And there was like detectives like, you know, reading me my rights. I was like a 12-year-old. Wow. And like taking me to the station for interrogation and shit. And, you know, and I was just like, damn. And that was an ominous warning that I failed to heed, you know, because I don't think most 12-year-olds are like... That was definitely like a red flag, I think, that... Because it was more like that situation didn't mean... Like, it didn't register on my emotional scale. Like, I saw that happen and then was just like... I'm numb to it. Like, I was like... And I'm not saying that, like, that's... Like, I don't claim to be hardcore or, like, you know, gangster or this or that. It's just like... I do claim to be mentally ill, and like fucking, there's just something that doesn't fire, like in my synapses, and like I just don't feel like other people. Like
the fear of the law didn't register with you at that age. It was just,
or seeing someone get hurt. Yeah. It just didn't ever like really affect me.
There was no empathy,
right? And like it was weird, like because I watched the chick get beat up, and then I just kept going around. I never thought about it. When her dad showed up, I was like, "What the hell are you like? Why are you here?" You know. And that's something that would go, like, carry on through my life is just this, like, being desensitized to violence and, like, strange situations and, like, the abnormal, you know. But that was definitely the first kind of interaction with the law enforcement.
And that was that right around the time that you guys started smoking weed together?
Yeah, I started smoking weed at 12, and my older brother was a pothead or whatever, so it was just like all of our in Hancock Park was still like this like family kind of community. So the older kids were always around, like, you know, we had relationships with our siblings, and so that kind of worked against us because they all partied in Hancock Park, so they all kicked down the drugs to us.
Right, because when you're a 16-year-old realizing like, oh wait, weed doesn't really fuck you up that much, it's like giving it to your 13-year-old brother doesn't seem like that big of a deal.
Right, yeah. So it's like that's how we all got turned on, and then real quickly we were taking shrooms and then getting people's like, again, going to a rich high school, everybody was on speed. You know, like the Dexedrine and Ritalin and fucking all these prescription drugs for ADD. So once we got on drugs, by like 14, we were taking shrooms like regularly, and we were getting speed from all the kids that were taking their
like the Ritalin and
everything, yeah. And then by 9th grade, fucking the girls where I went to school had like lots of cocaine, and because like I said, they had money.
Yeah.
So like the first time I was doing coke was like, you know, chilling with these chicks, and like they were just like, "Have you done coke?" And like first period before math, we're in a bathroom snorting coke lines, and I was like, "Dude, this is crazy," you know, and like, and that's just everything was just kind of sped up, and like I don't know really why it happened like that, but
I could see that with the city life. I mean, like that's it sounds like a fucking TV show about Hollywood. You know what I mean? Right. Like when you're 15 and doing coke, like was sex already around too?
There was like, yeah, I lost my virginity when I was 15, incidentally, but like it was still, I think, you know, it wasn't out like, I mean, it wasn't as prevalent as there was more like making out and like shit like that. Yeah. Up until probably kids were like 16, but there was a few of us that were fucking already, and you know, it was, you know, but most of us were fucking the same chick. Yeah. Like, I think everybody lost their virginity to the same girl. And then, like, you know, but that's a good, I think, like, yeah, like, it was just, by 10th grade, like, everyone was on drugs. Mm-hmm. And it was just me and my homeboy were on harder drugs, you know, and we gravitated towards, like, LSD. And not that that's a harder drug, but I think I got so involved in like the psychedelic experience that I basically was like, you're not on my level. Like nobody in this world really knows what I'm going through because I'm this fucking philosopher king that takes acid 3 times a week and dissects everybody's like social, like economic structure.
I always used to say when I was into doing acid that like it's one of those drugs where every time you take it, it changes your life and you realize something about yourself, but then you can't remember it the next day.
Right. Yeah. That's it. We just sit there on acid in English class and fucking realize how much better we are than everyone. And, you know, but I do think like the LSD that I was taking, like back then it was really good. I don't know what's around today, but, you know, it definitely enabled me to like love myself for like the first time in my life. Cause I was always like, hated myself. And, like I used to think like, this is just an example of something tangible result that like happened from taking acid is like I used to think I was really ugly when I smiled, and like I would like cover my mouth when I laughed.
How young were you when you were thinking this?
Like 13, 14, 15. And I don't know how that gets in a kid's head. Yeah. It's like I'm ugly, right? And when I smile, I look fat or like right, like this is how my mind works, right? And you know, people like latch on to that specific thing, like. And I was like, oh, like I don't like the way I look when I laugh, so I'd cover my mouth. And then it was on acid that I was like looking at myself in a mirror and was like, man, I'm a beautiful person. Yeah. And I was like, man, like smiling is so rad, bro. Like it's so natural. Like this is how we're supposed to be, you know?
I feel like I used to have, with my personal experiences with acid, I used to have the exact opposite with when I would have the battles with the mirror. Oh man, I would like hate myself looking in the mirror, like on some like, fuck man, it's a Wednesday night and you're like out of your gourd, like what the fuck is going on with your life type of shit, you know what I mean? It does make you see the world in a much more beautiful light. Trees look better, everything just looks and feels better.
I agree.
At that point, were you like smoking weed every day already?
Yeah, I was like, I was smoking weed every day from like 14, and then I started selling weed and like you know, I stayed on the hallucinogen trip probably through most of my high school years. You know, that was like my main shit. Like pressed pills of ecstasy came out like probably by like 97 or something. And I mean, they'd been around, but they hit like where we went to school. And then from there, it was just like, you know, as I got more into like graffiti, less into skateboarding, I was hanging out with people that were not from my area.
When did you first start getting into graffiti?
I had like a lot of friends that were involved in different crews, like mainly like LTS and KOG, and you know, I just looked up to them a lot. Like I sold drugs for a couple of dudes from LTS, and you know, it was like I thought those dudes were the coolest because like they had their own apartments and fucking sold a lot of drugs and were artists. And like not like street artists, like they're like grimy fucking climbing in downtown LA rooftop fucking like just with the business fucking motherfuckers. Like,
was it more on like the tag banger culture kind of? Like I don't really know that much about graffiti. I'm sure the audience doesn't really know that much.
Well, LTS, like I mean, big shots out to them, you know. But it was kind of different from a lot of other graffiti crews at the time in LA because they had a much more diverse mixture of people. And there were people like from LTS that were also like fucking actual like, gang members. So they had this kind of like more just like brawlic attitude in general because there was like their graffiti crew, but some of their members are associated with like some real shady motherfuckers, you know. So it kind of upped the ante as far as like a graffiti beef could turn into something like
you might get stabbed
or shot.
Yeah. And
you know, it was like just a little more realer. And, like, that was my interacting with some of those dudes. You know, I think my homeboy, Kyle, fucking, he took me down. Like, I don't know. I don't remember the first time I smoked crack, like, where we got it from. But I do remember it had something to do with some of those dudes. You know, like, and I'm not saying that LTS condones smoking crack by any means. But, because actually Retna, when he was still from LTS, was the first one to tell me, like, not to smoke crack. Mm-hmm. You know, and, because, like, I didn't grow up in a neighborhood with crackheads, so we didn't see. If you don't see the negative effects of something, it's like, you know, like I didn't know anybody that smoked crack. You know what I'm saying? So when I started smoking crack, my homeboys from other areas like Koreatown or Mid City or you know different like lower income neighborhoods, they were like, "Yo, crack's not cool, man." They're like, in our neighborhood, if you smoke crack, you're a fucking loser. You know. And I was partying, and I was like, well, that's not my experience. And I'm just, you know.
And this was a point where you already had a car, so you're traveling throughout the city?
Yeah, I was mobile. Yeah. You know, I was independent in that regard. And I was selling drugs, so I had money.
But you were still at the parents' crib?
Yeah, I lived with my parents till I was 18. Okay. And, you know, eventually, like, the crack became kind of like a couple time a week thing or whatever, and I didn't really think anything of it. But I ended up leaving LA to go to school in Portland, Oregon, like when I was 18 years old. And that's really where shit for me like took like a fucking, you know, shit got like way more real, you know.
Where did you go to school in Portland?
I went to Reed College in Southeast Portland, and it's like a very prestigious private school. Liberal arts school.
So you did good in high school still, regardless of the trouble you're getting into?
You know, it was weird. Like, I didn't do great, you know, like, but, and it's funny because we're talking about graffiti and drugs and shit. And, like, when I interviewed for Reed, I did good enough at my school, where coming from my school, like, I got into, like, UC Riverside and University of Oregon, Boulder. Like, I was going to college. I never fucked up enough where, and that was, like, in my house, my parents were, like, you know, because they were finding bags of shrooms, scales, weed, you know, and I was pretty upfront with them, like, I do drugs. They were like, don't drive while you're high and don't fuck up in school.
So your parents are, like, pretty liberal and, like, understanding, like, you're going to experiment.
Yeah, they were both, came up in the 60s, and they had both done drugs. Yeah. And it was like, just get decent grades, don't fail out of school, graduate, and go to college, you know, and don't drive while you're high. And I was able to, like, fulfill most of those obligations, you know, so by the time I had when I went up to interview for Reed, I didn't think I would get in there because in '98 that school was like voted like #1 in best overall academic experience in the nation, and I was just like, fuck it, I'll just go, whatever. And in my interview, and I wrote my essay about graffiti, and I think like they were just kind of interested in me, like, what's this kid about, So they let me in. They were like, fuck it, and we fucking tore it up, and like that's when shit got real crazy.
What were you dressing like back then? I'm curious, because like right now, like I could tell you've been in some trouble before, the way you dress and stuff. Like like you have a certain style to you, where like you're not somebody. For those of you who don't know Caddy Ron, like he's not somebody that doesn't look like somebody you would want to meet in a dark alley, perhaps.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So like, what were you looking like back then?
Back then, it was like I think I was already wearing Dickies, but I don't know where the Dickies. I don't know how the origin of the Dickies came. Like I dressed like more like a skater. Okay. Like a mid '90s skateboarder. Like big,
baggy jeans, at-knee shoes.
I never wore jeans, but like DCs.
Okay.
DC shoes and like big Dickies, like but old, like worn out, like not like nice Dickies.
Frayed on the bottom and stuff.
Yeah, like worn out Dickie pants and like big T-shirt, like just a T-shirt, like a skateboard shirt or like a fish T-shirt. Yeah. Senior year of high school, I wore a tie-dye Grateful Dead shirt every single day of the year.
Yeah, you were a fish head for a while or something, right?
I still am, man. Yeah, fish is like a huge part of my life. That's like, we could do a whole other podcast just about that.
Or let's go back to Reed College, and then I want to hear about the fish stuff too, because that's another thing where that like completely surprised me when you told me about that. So yeah, tell me like when you went to Reed, what started happening?
Well, like I get up to Portland and I was just like, and I'm not like gassing myself up, but I was just too much for the community. Like it was like they had this like perfect like microcosm of fake world kind of thing going on. There was no rules. Like my first week of school, like somebody drove a van into the like quad area and lit it on fire, and we like partied around it, and that was like totally acceptable. At Reed back then, you could do anything you wanted. People walked around naked. People sat out like smoking solar bong hits with a keg of beer, like all under 21, and you were totally protected on campus. And security's job was like moderation management. It was like, just don't let anyone die. But, I mean, it was crazy, and there was lots of more drugs, and everybody drank every day. And the kids just happened to study really hard too. But everybody partied, and that's where I like was really interested in college radio. So I saw they had a radio station, and I was like, oh, cool, like I'm going to get involved in the college radio. But I started writing graffiti on campus, like super crazy, like everywhere.
What did you used to write?
Back then I wrote Cristo. And it was like real fast, fucking everybody hated me because they were like, oh, this kid's from L.A., and there wasn't a lot of kids from L.A. So and outside of California, everybody hates California. They're just like, oh, fuck you. You think you're from L.A. and you're cool. And like I was writing so much graffiti on campus because it was easy. I could get away with it, and you couldn't be like get in trouble. So I just used it as an opportunity to just destroy everything. And like there was some situation like freshman year where the kids who ran the radio station, they pissed me off, and like I went in the station and I smashed up the whole station with like a hammer and and then wrote my name all over the walls. And I mean, like I put like 5 feet big holes in the drywall and broke everything, and then signed my name next to all the damage. And then but nobody saw me do it, and fucking, like I couldn't get in trouble. And they were like, we know you did it. And like somehow I managed to like convince them I didn't do it.
Somebody who just stole your name or something.
Well, no, I admitted to writing on the wall, but I said it must have happened after I wrote on the walls. Like someone, and the station had been left unlocked, and so they were like, all right, maybe it's possible. But that situation like led me, I got kicked off of the radio show I was involved in. Or like they didn't want to associate with me anymore. Was
that one of your like first biggest outlashes, or like was that something characteristic of you at the time?
Well, like I mean, I started setting people up and like for marijuana, like robberies, and like that was like another example I'd say of like
when you were in high school.
Yeah, okay. And like you know, I would like wait for people like to want to buy a lot of weed and then set them up. And I had a lot of these shady homies they didn't go to my high school, and I would get them involved and like develop these like crazy schemes, you know, to rob these kids from Beverly Hills or like the Valley, you know, and it wasn't uncommon. It just became more and more normal. Like I was talking about, like the just not caring about people, you know, where it's like if I didn't respect you, then I would just, you know, I'd be your friend up until the point where I could get what I want and then, you know, set you up. I might even sell weed to you for months and then wait till you're going to buy a half pound.
Just catch you slipping.
And then I'd have my homie come rob us both. You know, the classic like marijuana heist. Right. And so that became like common play. Like, so it wasn't, you know, by that point, you know, I had friends that were getting shot, and I'd, you know, seen a lot of other shit starting to go down, and buying crack in Hollywood. Like I'd seen a lot of, started getting like, you know, so at this point, my attitude was like, nobody from Hancock Park is like living like I am, you know, like I'm, with the exception of a few people. So when I got to Portland, I was like, really thought I was the shit. Because I was like, I'm from LA and I have this like real street experience that you guys don't know nothing about. And that's how I carried myself. And it really pissed people off, you know. And getting kicked off that show, then I was basically like banned from college radio. And this other dude had a show. It was like Friday nights, like 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. And it was like the worst time slot you could have. But he was the only person that would let me in to the fucking radio station. And I just was like, yo, just play some instrumentals. And I just started rapping. And like that show became the best show and the longest running radio show at Reed College in history.
No shit.
Yeah. And like within a year, the kids that had like kicked me off the station were like hanging out at the station when our show was going on. And like that was my like, I was like, all right, I'm at Reed, so I'm gonna make it work. So I became like the best rapper. Well, I was the best rapper at Reed because there was only like 2,000 people there. Yeah. And I just like low key was just like, I'm the shit, you know, like this is my world. I didn't even get involved in the like rap scene in Portland because Reed was so like bubbled.
It's like a microcosm.
Yeah, like I'm just gonna be the best rapper at Reed. And if you're like a visitor, you come through, we can chop it up or battle or whatever. But you know, so being there was really like what my first experience was, just being like a dope rapper, where it was like past like high school, like I think I'm tight, whereas like I'm the shit, you know. Right. Like now I'm like 20.
Did you throw shows and stuff?
Yeah, we threw shows. We opened up for like Aesop Rock and the Living Legends and like, you know, because they would all come through and play campus.
Yeah, that was like probably around early 2000s when they were super cracking.
Absolutely, yeah, like 99, 2000, 2001. Yeah. You know, it was always like Sunspot or Lucky coming through, Mr. Journeyman, Living Legends. We opened for Aesop Rock. Like that's like one of the best shows I ever played still. You know, it's like 500 people in this tiny room being like, fuck, you know. And also because the community respected me and they were like, so it went from, you know, this guy's like the pariah from LA to like.
It's not like you were the thirsty opener, like people were there to support you because they knew who you were.
Yeah, because on campus I was the shit, you know. But the only thing I regret is that I didn't get more involved in the Northwest scene because now it's like I have so much respect for a lot of like Old Dominion cats or like fucking, you know, especially, you know, Sleep, Henri, all these dudes. And I would see them because I went to a lot of shows still and I would always see the local openers and I kind of wish that I had done that more. I think it could have, but like my experience, I don't regret anything because doing that radio show was like the best practice. That was like my version of like the Blowed or something because it was like every week and I was the main focal point, so I had to fucking step up my shit. It wasn't like battling other kids. It was like all these people were here last week. So like you better come tighter than you came last week, you know, because...
Were you guys playing other music too?
Yeah, we mainly played like West Coast underground shit, you know, Legends, Freestyle Fellowship, Hieroglyphics, like... Did
you get into that stuff through like the graffiti scene?
Yeah. Like all the kids had the tapes and shit back then, and I mean, I'm the first hip hop that I really like loved was gangster rap, like NWA, Eazy-E, you know, 2 Live Crew, and then probably about 14 years old, someone gave me the Jizza Liquid Swords tape, And then I was like, whoa, this is fucking crazy. Like,
yeah, that's a life changer.
That was like the first, when I listened to that, I was like, and I was late. Like, I hadn't heard of any Wu-Tang shit, and it had already been out for a few years. Yeah. And so I was quick to just go get every single Wu album I could. And that was like, you know, then to J. Rue, to Gang Starr, to like kind of the natural, I think, progression of a hip-hop head kind of finding out, like, wow, this shit's...
Starting off with what's local to you and then branching out and figuring out the other regions.
I went through my whole, like, you know, native tongues fucking phase, you know, where all I listened to was Tribe and De La, and, like, you know, I think that experience as an individual is, for a rapper, I think is important.
What region has stuck with you the most? Like, if you had to pick your favorite kind of rap to listen to, what is it right now?
I think, like, Northern California gangster rap. Like, I think X-Rated, Brother Lynch, Mac Dre, rest in peace, you know, fucking 40, like Turf Talk, like, and it's a pre-hyphy movement. Like, I'm talking about, like, just gutter ass fucking prison rap and fucking drug shit, and, you know, like, that for me was, I got exposed to that in Oregon. Because the gangsters up there were the ones that I knew were from the south side of Chicago, and they had relocated to Portland, and they were all working at Reed College, like on some sort of like work release program, like in the kitchen. Wow. And this is like, I was talking about this the other day, how it's like, I'm like the only dude I think that could go to college at Reed and end up like becoming friends with the kitchen staff, you know, because I'm like, I don't know, I just see them in the kitchen, like, who are these dudes, you know? I start talking to them, and then I'm like, oh, these are the real Portland cats. Like this is who I want. I want to know, because for the first year up there, I didn't know where to buy crack. I didn't know where the hard drugs were at. I was just taking, you know, smoking weed, drinking, doing coke. Like,
so did you always kind of feel like you couldn't relate to the other kids at Reed?
I just felt like I was better than them, and I think that's a curse, you know. It's like when you have that like terminal uniqueness, you know.
Well, which is funny because I feel like saying I feel like I'm better than the kids that I go to school with, but then finding solace in meeting up with the people that work in the kitchen at the school. Right. Most of those kids at the school would go, "Oh, look at that guy's a fucking piece of shit. He's hanging out with the staff."
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's just how like that kind of like self-identity of just being like. And I think that like stopped me from having a lot of like healthy relationships, because it was like, you can't relate to me, you know? And like what I found out later in life was like, my experience is a dime a dozen, you know? Like what I thought was like this fucking crazy life, I was barely scratching the surface compared to like the people that I was emulating or the people that I looked up to, you know, like in the world of Reed, I might have looked edgy or hardcore or like counterculture, but I was just copying people that like I had seen doing it before me, and you know, really the only thing that I was really pushing to the edge was music and drugs. You know, like I wasn't really fighting too much or like doing too much crazy shit. Like, you know, I acted like I would, you know, and this is like where like for me the story gets like really interesting, because I kind of wrote my own self-fulfilling prophecy, because like through my emulation of like this hardcore type of person and putting all this emphasis on my street credibility, and like before it even existed, you know, that's the shit I was already putting in my lyrics. Like I used to write like only like autobiographical stories of like serial murderers, and like I would like, and only like really highly topical raps, you know, like I would write about specific crimes that happened that I read about in the newspaper, or like just like really weird shit. Like, and so the first people that were like listening to my music, it was almost like horrorcore rap, you know, but I wasn't saying like, I was actually writing like autobiographies of Jeffrey Dahmer, you know, and like Richard Ramirez, and like that movie Alpha Dog. Like, I wrote a song about that movie.
I actually had just moved to Santa Barbara when that all went down.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, that was, like, infamous, the Jesse James Hollywood shit.
I used to rap under the name Jesse James Hollywood.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember, like, when Alpha Dog came out and all that. That was a big deal when I moved down there in, like, '01 or something.
Well, it was crazy because, like, I caught that story and was just, like, infatuated with it, you know? Like, damn, this is crazy. And so, as a writer, I made a song out of it. And, you know, like 7 years later, the Alpha Dog movie's coming out, and I'm like, fuck, man, like I should have been on the soundtrack, you know, like fucking I already had a song about this shit, bro. Yeah. But it was like up in Portland, fucking. That's when like that was my first experience with like opiates.
At Reed, you said it took you a year to find crack and stuff. Like when you were looking, like were you asking your other students, like, do you know where I can find crack? And were they like, what the fuck?
No, but like I didn't know about the city geographically, so Portland is like very segregated. It's like North Portland, Northeast, Southeast, Southwest, and like there's no black people outside of North Portland. So, and I'm not saying like that's where the crack is with the blacks, but like, you know, typically if you want to find crack in an urban area, just go to Martin Luther King Boulevard. Yeah. Like that's a good starting point. Right. Like that's, and I'm not, you know, I'm just saying, but after I met these dudes at Reed that worked there, you know, then I seen like, wait, oh, these guys are actually like, I didn't know those type of people were existing in Portland. I had this kind of like rural, kind of clean, like, you know,
outlook of the state.
Yeah. And so hanging out with them and it's kind of getting around the city more.
They were all into like some shady shit or what?
They were all drug dealers.
Yeah, yeah. So did you get in on the hustle there with them?
Yeah. I started working for them, and they were actually working for this white dude from Bozeman, Montana, who went to Reed, but he kind of created this like drug empire.
What were they mainly selling?
Marijuana and cocaine.
Okay.
And you know, so that's like, and I didn't want to sell weed because it was so cheap up there, so I started selling coke. And that was like my, like I was really successful selling weed in high school, but for this, probably like by second year of college, I had that like little Tony Montana complex where, you know, I always had cocaine, and I had what I thought was a lot of it, probably just a few grams all the time, but like, I just get a half ounce, an ounce of coke and fucking, you know, sit in my room and snort it all day. And then when you start realizing the power that drugs have, because people want to be around you, people want to hang out with you, everybody treats you like you're the shit because they want to do your coke. And it all kind of feeds into your ego and your inflated sense of self.
And you already had that sense of I'm better than everyone, so that's just gassing it up
farther.
So
now I'm like, oh, like people need me, people respect me now even more. And I was seeing this chick, and like long story short, like she ended up getting pregnant by some other dude, and I was like totally in love with her. And that just like that kind of like I just kind of broke off like even further from reality. I went and I bought a gun. It was the first time I ever bought a gun. And you know, I just sat in this room for like a month just doing coke and just putting the gun in my mouth like every night, like just, and I was just like, I would like load the gun, I'd like put it in my mouth, and I'd like just sit there and then just see like how far I could pull the trigger before I like would shoot myself in the head. And I didn't even really want to commit suicide. Like I just was like, maybe I do, you know, yeah. Like I'm not sure, you know, but like if I do enough coke, then maybe I'll like finally just blow my brains out. Yeah. So like, and I got so deep into this shit that like I basically couldn't function anymore, and like my brother had to come and try and like get me to come back to LA, and he wasn't successful. I didn't come back.
You've been clean for over 6 months now, right?
Yeah, I'm clean now.
What was the drug that pushed you over the edge?
I think it was definitely opiates, and starting with Oxycontin, and then once I became addicted to Oxycontin, then when I moved back to LA, you know, it was Oxys weren't very prevalent at the time.
Chopping them and snorting them, or were you shooting them?
No, it was just snorting them. And all of my friends got addicted to Oxycontin. All the kids that were selling drugs started selling Oxys, and everybody started doing them. And nobody knew, and nobody was there to tell us. And I'm not saying that if they had told us we would have done anything different, but if you're dealing with a bunch of people that have no experience with opiate addiction, you know, we all thought every other drug we've done in excess and been able to stop. You know, like I took ecstasy every day for a year. And then when I got tired of it, I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. But this shit was like some other shit. It was like...
Did you ever feel a physical need for crack when you were smoking crack? Like, did you ever become a quote-unquote crackhead?
Yeah, I did. But it's different because, like, I would smoke crack. But with crack, when you wake up and you're not on... You know, once you go to sleep, you're cool. You don't have a physical craving for more. It's a mental... Like, it's a mental obsession you know, after you're smoking crack, you want more and you feel like you need it. But when you wake up in the morning, you're not physically sick.
Whereas opiates, it's like your skin feels like your skin is crawling if you don't have it.
Once you've developed like a dependence on opiates and you're removed from opiates, you get sick. And it's like an inexplicable, like terrorizing fucking, just every part of your body is fucked. And like you have to get more. And the psychological terror that like precedes the physical withdrawal is even worse. And it's so much to the point where, like, you could have a bag full of heroin and you're already worried that it's going to end sometime. Like, you're like, fuck, man, like, I have 6 grams of dope, which is a pretty good amount of dope. But I'm already thinking, like, this isn't enough. You know, like, this isn't going to last forever.
So what year did you move back to L.A. from Portland?
Well, I came back, I think it was, like, '02. And, I was so strung out. I've been strung out in Portland for a year on heroin, and all my homies up there were now doing heroin.
How fast was the transition from Oxys to heroin?
About 3 months, and it was like, you know, and things changed so quickly. Like everybody that was friends, and we were all selling drugs, having fun. It was like, this sucks, and we don't trust each other, and fucking everybody would steal from anyone, and like it's every man for himself.
Everyone
now.
Just quickly develops like junkie tendencies.
Yeah, and we're just like. You know, and then all of a sudden, like, I realized, like, damn, we're all addicted to Oxys.
When is the point when it's like, oh, I really like Oxys, and, like, somebody goes, well, oh, then you should fucking try heroin, or whatever the case may be. Like, do you start snorting it, or did you mainline it instantly? Like,
we got back to L.A., and we had no Oxys down here, and so we were having Oxys mailed to us from Portland, and we ran out, and it was still a point where we weren't, like, crazy sick, like, but we weren't feeling well. And I was the one that was like, I know where we can get heroin. And I was with 2 of my friends who had never done heroin before. And so 3 kids, all from L.A., 1 from Beverly Hills, 1 from Hancock Park, 1 from Hollywood. And it was just like, you know, that was the defining moment in a lot of our lives, I'm sure, where it was like, I know where to get heroin. And so we went and we got heroin, and, you know, we snorted it, and I stayed snorting it for like a year and a half. I went back to school with a heroin habit.
So you were just down here like for a summer visit with plans to go back to school?
Yeah. When I go back, by the time I get back to Portland, everyone I knew on Oxys was on heroin. And so then it was just heroin.
And were they snorting too?
They were all snorting. Okay. And then fast forward to the next summer, so like a full year later, I managed to function like at a pretty high level just snorting heroin. I still passed all these qualifying examinations in school, and like, you know, I mean, there was some unmanageability, but next summer when I got back was when I started shooting heroin. And within 3 months, you know, my family was like, you got to go, man. And you know, that was the first time I went to rehab.
What's the tipping point where it goes from snorting to shooting?
If you're intelligent, you realize that you're wasting your dope. And it's like, so that's like, it's the big question. It's like, okay, I'm wasting my dope, but like once you shoot, you're fucked, you know? And if, you know, now everybody's smoking heroin, and it's not that one's less addictive. Like, doctors would even tell you that the physical withdrawal from smoking heroin can sometimes be worse because of the way it's absorbed in the lungs. But when you shoot dope, there's the rush that people talk about, and that's what you become addicted to, is like the ritual and the rush. And like that doesn't come from any other route of administration. So it's like once you go IV, you're fucked, because you're like, most people have this moment of clarity where they're like, damn, I wasted heroin. Until this point, like, this is what it's like to do heroin. And if you have that experience, then you shoot it again. And then nobody I know successfully went from shooting to go back to snorting or smoking. It's just like, it doesn't make sense.
So your folks said, you got to come back to LA and get cleaned up?
No, I was back here. They said, like, you know, we're not sending you back to school. Okay. And I ended up having to go to rehab or whatever. And that began like this whole other like era of my life where I just was like either homeless or in jail or fucking, and that's what I was talking about, where it's like all of a sudden, like all this shit that I had like glamorized and fucking like looked up to, and like fucking all of a sudden I was on the street, you know, and I was like realizing like, oh shit, like I'm not this super tough dude. I'm this little kid from fucking, you know, Hancock Park that's lost on Skid Row, and, you know, I didn't have a fucking tattoo on my body, and I'm like...
What age was this?
This was like 21.
And how did you survive on the day-to-day living in Skid Row?
Well, like, it started just, you know, probably like a lot of other people on Skid Row, just... I mean, anything. It was like... you first of all, like, you have to learn the game, like, and if you don't know the game, it's like, you don't really want to know it. It's like... Everybody's got to hustle, and you just have to figure out like what you're gonna do. And a day-to-day basis, like, could just be like panhandling at the subway station, and then basically like you have to get enough money somehow to get high. Once you get high, then you get well, then you're ready to like really go hustle, and then you develop some schemes or plans or like. I would sell fake heroin. That was like a big thing that I did. And I would like watch the heroin spots downtown. I knew like when they would take breaks, when they would go leave the block for like 20 minutes. And then I'd show up with just enough fake balloons of heroin to catch a few people, sell a couple just to then shake the spot. You know, doing small robberies, like boosting shit, selling shit to, you know, stealing from stores and then reselling it to other stores.
So are you just living like out of a backpack?
Dude, I was like I joke around about like my periods of homelessness, like, but like I didn't have shit. Like I didn't even have a backpack.
How did you sleep at night? Like where would you sleep?
Normally I wouldn't sleep, and like I would go so hard that like I would just not sleep, you know. I would just stay up all night trying to get high and getting high. And that's the weird thing about being homeless is like if you're relatively intelligent and a pretty good hustler, like then you stay having drugs even though you're homeless. And if you're high, you don't need to sleep. And so then, you know, I kind of avoided the pitfalls of a lot of homeless people, like because I wasn't becoming like a homeless like bum pushing a cart or carrying bags. Like I just am here to get high until something stops me from getting high. And so I don't need a backpack. I don't need a change of clothes. I don't need anything, you know. And initially you go through that phase of still calling your family, you know, asking if you can come home, brush your teeth or change your clothes.
And would they let you?
No.
So they had already made an ultimatum with you, like get clean.
Oh, yeah, I was out. Yeah, there were locks changed at the pad.
But they tried to send you to rehab before that happened?
Yeah, I tried to. They sent me to rehab like two or three times.
Oh, wow. By the time you were 21.
Yeah. And then I went back to Oregon on my own, like convinced someone to buy me a ticket. And I was just kind of doing my own thing. And then I got involved in a legal situation in Oregon and came back to California, like on the run.
When was the first time you finally ended up in jail?
I think it was like 2003. And I was in downtown at the Alexandria Hotel. And I was shooting some heroin. I was supposed to go to like some place to live, and like I had $10, and I went to the hotel. I was shooting up in the bathroom, and it was just like the cops kicked in the door, and I went to Parker Center, which is like city jail in downtown. And I just remember like I didn't call my family or call anyone because I was like I'm just fucked, you know. Like no one's gonna bail me out anyway, so. Go to my arraignment, and then I remember that first time, like rolling up to the county jail here. That's like a fucking serious ass moment, like, you know, because this is like when all this shit's coming real. It's like, okay, like you want to be a badass, like you want to be cool, like it's like, well, you know, LA County Jail is no joke. That's the fucking, I think it's the biggest county jail in the country, and any lawyer will tell you that county jail is worse than every state prison like combined. I mean, the shit that goes on in there is like fucking so intense. And it, like from the moment you pull up, you're just like, if you haven't been there before, you know, don't go. But especially being a small white kid, it was like just that first like moment.
And you still had no tattoos at this point, or what?
I had like one tattoo.
Because now you're covered. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I'm asking for those of you in the audience. So you go into county jail as this small, skinny,
like 130 pounds
heroin fiend.
Yeah, skinny ass.
Not
white
looking
boy.
tough.
No,
Like,
I wasn't tough.
and how did you survive? What happened?
You know, that's the crazy thing, man. It's because like I treated people with respect, and I was like willing to learn. Like I was teachable, and so I identified with my like. You know, you are separated or segregated by race, and I didn't have any misconceptions about who I was, and that works to your advantage, you know. And I was like, I'm white, and you know, I wasn't trying to like hide behind other people or anything. I was like, they asked me to like get involved in a certain like level, and I was like, okay. And I treated people with respect, and they were like, yeah, he's a youngster, but he's cool, you know. And like, I have funny stories. I had a different experience. I had a different outlook on life. You know, I was a talented artist. And so they were, initially, I just kind of got a pass. They were just like, nah, like, you know, Cadalack's cool, man. Like, he's a youngster, but he's like, he's with the business. You know, he's down for his shit, whatever. And I didn't have any problems really, like, you know, it wasn't until a few times like later coming back to jail where going to jail becomes like nothing. And then you start thinking that you are kind of tough, where you get reminded by someone else like, hey, you're not that tough, bro. Like, because there's always somebody bigger and badder. And like, I'm not that big and bad to begin with.
That first time that you were in county, how long were you there?
I think the first time I was there, I was only there for like maybe 2 weeks.
It was just like misdemeanor drug charge or like what?
It was felony.
So did you get shipped off to the pen?
No, that was like, this was like, back then there was like the drug programs were all like, you could basically, I had it down to a science where like you could go to jail and basically be out in like 3 weeks. If you knew what to do and like you knew how to talk to your public defender, and like, that was kind of my MO, was like, if I'm getting busted, then I'm going to ask for a drug program, and then they're going to release me. And then it takes 3 court dates to get released, and then basically just fucking run from your probation officer, fucking abscond, and like till you get arrested again.
So were you actually getting cleaned up for a little time?
Never. No. I had
so
no.
While you're in county, you're still on drugs.
No. I mean, you can't really get drugs in county. Like county is like sucks because like there's not that many drugs at all, and like the only drugs people bring in, they're using themselves or just for their homies. And like the best time I had in the county jail, I think like I got arrested on Skid Row like maybe like the 3rd or 4th time I got busted, and my mouth was full of balloons of heroin. So like I swallowed all the balloons, and that's why they sell heroin in balloons, so you can swallow it if you need to, and you can get it back. And fucking so I hit the county with the stomach full of heroin. Wow. And fucking. That was like the best time of my life, because I'm not literally, but for a jail experience, like knowing that you have dope, you know, like I was the man, like, and I was like negotiating business deals with heroin that was still in my stomach, you know, like I was telling people like I was already trading for shit, and like people already knew in all the fucking pods, like they were like, you know, white boy over in 162B pod, he's got dope. It'll be here any day. You know, we're just waiting on the delivery, you know. Wow. And like other trustees were bringing me like
you're just drinking like prune juice to try and get it out.
We drink baby oil.
That helps get it out?
Yeah, supposedly. But I didn't get it back for 5 days. And that means every shit you take for 5 days, you're digging through your shit, and fucking you learn these little like.
Are they like public bathrooms that you're in there?
No, in that pod it was there was like one bathroom in the day room that was like private. So, like, I would go dig through my shit in there, like, so I wouldn't, like, offend people, because my cellie was this guy, Roca, and he was, like, really, like, clean, like, anally retentive Filipino, and, like, he wouldn't let you wear shoes in the cell, and he would, like, wax the floor, and so, like, I didn't want to, like, dig through my shit around him, because, like, I thought it would be disrespectful, but, and that's, like, that's, like, the funniest thing about jail is, like, how it's all about respect, and it's like these people that are fucking monsters and animals, like all of a sudden it's like if you don't take a shower, like people don't like you, or like if you like, you know, don't keep your bed really clean, it's the disrespect,
Oh, shit.
you know. And it's like if you like chew with your mouth open, or if you reach over my plate while I'm eating food. And so actually it's all about good manners. Like if you want to like survive in jail, it's like you be really polite and respectful while not being a punk or a pushover, and then like have really good manners, like good personal hygiene habits, like real clean. And those are the people that are perceived to be functioning, like they're programming. It's like, oh, you know, that's why you take care of yourself, exercise, and that's what it's all about. It's just how you appear. And so I'm digging through my shit or whatever, and then finally I get the balloons back, and then I had to take them into my cell to wash them off in the sink, and then, you know, it's like smells like shit, you know, shit all over my hands. And,
I'm sorry that I'm laughing at that shit.
No, it's funny.
It's like a funny mental image.
And it's like funny because like this is what people were waiting for, you know,
Yeah.
and that's like the lifestyle. That's like, and then I'm trading some of the dope. So I got some weed and some alcohol and like fucking, you know, I just had this moment where I was sitting in my cell, looking out the window, and like I really at that moment like I thought I was Mac Dre. Like I was like, because he has a line in his song where he's like, I'm sitting in my cell looking out the window, drinking Pruno, smoking Indo, and I'm sitting in jail smoking a joint in my cell, watching the Gold Line drive by, drinking alcohol. And I was like, I made it, you know, like I'm the shit, you know, like fucking, this is like I really became like all the shit that I talked about.
Yeah.
And I thought that was cool. You know, I was like, fuck it, you know. And like I think in 2005, like I got out right before Thanksgiving, and it was like I had lost all sense of identity. Like I didn't know.
By that point, were you just like covered in tattoos?
Not really. I mean, I had gotten some more. I mainly just went to work on like my chest.
And that was all inside?
No, most of that was like when I would get out, and that was the thing too, is like, because I'd get out of jail and want to build myself up to go back to jail.
Exactly. I find it interesting that it's like, particularly when you mentioned like, oh, I was just a young kid, didn't have any tattoos, because like now that you are covered in tattoos, like it looks like, I would look at you, no offense, and be like, oh, this guy has fucking been in jail before. You know what I'm saying?
And that was like the whole image of like, when you get out of jail and know you're going back to jail, you know, I would try and create myself in a way, like, I would want to shave my head before I go to jail. As soon as I get to jail, I want to bake my head bald, you know, and it's all about appearances.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that you say like, oh, at that point I felt like Mac Dre, because it's like you had this mental transformation from, you know, your upbringing to where you are now, and then it's like you also manifested this physical representation and transformation as well.
Right. But with that, your whole value system changes, and like once you perceive yourself to be good, and like, you know, every time I went to county, like I was in general population, what we call running mainline. I didn't snitch on anyone. I never asked to be in protective custody. So that's how you build your character as an inmate. You know, ultimately as a convict, it's like you're living by a code of ethics, and like that's your pride. Is like, you're either good or you're no good, and that's as simple as it is. In the CDC, you're either considered a good person or you're no good, and if you're no good, then you're a throwaway. You're a cast off, and you'll get like, you know, you can't exist in real society. So it's like this becomes the most important thing, and preparing yourself, like even to this day, you know, it's like that's why I exercise. That's why I like got tattoos, is like because I was living with this, like, if I went, like when I go back, you know, I have to be ready just as soon as I hit the floor, like to be involved, you know, because it's not an option to not be involved. And like so that's how I built myself up, and like that's how I became, like basically how I became a man.
I think that I met you around like, I think maybe 2008. Were you in and out that whole time from like 03 to 08?
I was the last time I got out was November of 05.
Did you end up in state at all?
No, I wasn't. I didn't do any state time in California. I've been arrested in like a few different states, you know, and I got into some trouble in Ohio. that fucking I was like caught out there bringing heroin into the airport, and like that was a whole other.
When was that?
That must have been like 2001. When I got out here in 2005, I think like I had gotten a drug program, and like I'm saying, like all the experiences of like just living in rehabs and jail for like years, basically like 4 years. It was like, or homelessness, or like you just lose any sense of like who you really are. And, you know, so I like really didn't know. All I knew was like that I could rap. Like that was the only thing that stayed with me from my adolescence, because everything that I had known, all my friends were gone. You know, all my new friends were gone. All the like normal situations that I had were all in the shadow of this like new.
When you say the friends are gone, like, do you mean like friends that you grew up with just no longer want to associate with you? Have you seen a lot of people die?
I've seen it like both. Like all my high school friends left because I was too much. You know, all my friends from LA were graduating college and going on to like be agents and like lawyers and, you know, firemen and shit. And like they didn't want to associate with me. I became a liability to them. All my friends from Portland were either dead or incarcerated. You know, and it was like I basically watched like everyone walked away from me except my family. And like I had no friends. I had nothing. When I came to this last treatment center, I was like fucking wearing shoes from jail and nothing. I didn't have underwear, you know, and all I had was this like new sense of self where I was like, I'm not a punk. I'm not a fucking pushover. I'm a man now. And, you know, and I can rap good. And that's like basically when I came back to the LA like music scene, that was like the attitude that I had. It was like, because I missed out on all the shit. And I touched on this a little with James, but it was like, I wasn't at the Bloat every Thursday. I wasn't doing all these weird shows. Like, you know, I didn't know anybody. I just walked up to Project Bloat and like talked to Mike Eagle and never met the dude and was like, hey, yo, let's do a song together. You know, and he was like, all right. And like, I passed out CDs, like just to anyone, you know.
Where'd you produce the CD at?
I just recorded it with my friend, you know, like on Pro Tools in a house.
Like in 05 after you got out?
Yeah. And I wrote it all like while I was locked up. And, you know, I literally was just handing them out and not trying to even sell or anything. And that's how, like, you know, I handed one to like Rhetoric or like, and then Syra heard it with Rhetoric in a van on tour. And like, you know, just enough. Like I started going to Juice because of this dude Silence I met. And like, you know, I met Dumb and I met like Open Mic. And, you know, I started seeing that there were people that were around that were always around. So I started going to shows and like, you know, I wasn't, but I still didn't feel a part of because I had missed out on this like community.
When I met you, it was like, I had never heard of you, but at the same time, I was like, oh, this guy's like around the same age as me and he can rap and he's throwing shows and stuff. But it was weird because it was such like a tight-knit community at the time that it was all like word of mouth vouching. Like, I've never heard of Cadalack Ron. Like, who is this dude throwing these shows in Venice? And they're like, oh, he's a stand-up guy. Like, he handles his business good. And like, I'm like, all right, cool. And that was the thing is like, yeah, all the people that you mentioned, Dumb, Syra, Rhetoric, James, Mike, like, we were on this little bubble of a scene doing shows at the Knitting Factory together or wherever, you know. And yeah, I remember you breaking in, and it's interesting to hear about all like the needing to be in jail, or like when you're in jail being like you're either a good guy or not good,
right?
Because like when you came into the scene, it was like you had a good reputation behind you already,
right?
Was seemingly out of nowhere, and now I understand why.
Right. Well, it was like it's an interesting thing because like I think a lot of people would have been deterred from the scene because it was like, I mean, the message that I was getting, especially from like you know, some of the like former members of the swim team and like these like assholes from Project Bloat, like, and I love Project Bloat and most of the people down there, but there were these people where it was like, bro, you're not one of us, bro. And it wasn't because I was white, you know, because at that point, you know, the Bloat had evolved. And like when I went to the Bloat in '97, like I couldn't rap, you know, like they wouldn't let me, you know, like I'd rap a few bars and someone would cut me off and be like, fuck you, white boy. Like, you know, and coming back like almost 10 years later,
It was very diverse.
it was like anybody could rap, you know, and like but the difference is back then they would still boo you if you were whack, you know. Now it's like, now saying you're from the Blow to me is like, wow, like whatever, you know. That's like anybody can say they're a Blowdian. It's like back in the day, it was like these kids, you know, like you'd be intimidated to get in a cypher out front, you know, because Pterodactyl is so drunk, like, and lurking around and like fucking otherwise, and like, you know, you're like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, a lot of them, like, I got this vibe like they didn't want to let me into their community, and I was so like, I just wanted to rap. Like, I was like, yo, like, I want to just make music and shit, and I knew I was dope, and I was doing shows like pay to play shit with Sean Healy or fucking, you know, like I was trying to just get in anywhere. And it was people like Open Mic, you know, that fucking were like, yeah, I'll do a song with you, you know. And like, actually, when nobody would fucking talk to me, and like Open Mic lets me come to his house and do a track, you know. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, there is some sense of community. And like, you know, it was around that time that I met like Exist, you know. And I had actually approached him, and I was like sending him a message on MySpace, like, hey, will you do a feature on my record? Like, you know, because I grew up like listening to like Shapeshifters. And
He's talking about Existerio for the you guys that want to search that out.
yeah, Existerio. And you know, I was like, I'll give you $100 like to do a verse on my album or whatever. And then when we actually link up and meet, and he's like, damn, like, you rap dope. He's like, you don't need to give me any money, bro. Like, I like want to be like on your shit, you know, like. And then he listens to like a little bit about my life, and then he's like, yo, man, don't even trip. Like, fucking anything I can do to help you out, like, let me know. You know, at the time, like, my life stayed real, even like.
Were you cleaned up at this point?
I was cleaned up, but like shit was still always like.
Had your parents taken you back in? Like, they were cool with you again? Or no?
Yeah, I mean, it took a while, but like my first baby's mom was like locked up pregnant, and like, so I was expecting a kid. You know, my life was pretty dysfunctional still. So I had this like pregnant baby's mom in jail. You know, like, I didn't know fucking, you know, it was still like, but it was all like adding to like my rap life persona, where I was like, this is how, like, I worked so hard to work backwards down the socioeconomic ladder, where now I'm this fucking lost rapper in LA trying to make it. With the fucking, like, you know, the whole 8 Mile complex, where I'm like, baby mom fucking in jail, kid on the way, like, and it put this extra fire under me.
What was she in jail for?
She's an idiot. Like, I don't like to mention her because she's retarded, but like, she just was a fuck up, you know, like, she just couldn't get her shit together. If my son ever listens to this, like, I'm sorry that I said that about your mom, but like, you know, my new girlfriend is like. And my new baby's mom is like so much cooler and tighter than that bitch.
Do you have full custody of your son?
Yeah.
And so that she's out of the picture?
Yeah, she's gone. She got deported. And the only reason I stayed with her was because she was pregnant, you know, because I was like, I would have left that bitch fucking a long time ago. But, you know, she like did a fucking shady bitch move. Yeah. And as soon as she went to jail, she knew she was pregnant. And she's like, I'm going to keep the baby, because she was like, she knew I'm a good dude. She knew I would stick around. And, like, that shit worked for her because, you know, she manipulated me into fucking coming to visit her and fucking, you know. And I just did that shit for my kid, you know, because, like, I loved my son. And then when he was born, you know, I got him right away because she was locked up. So in the midst of all this, I'm out in the streets trying to fucking make a name for myself. And it was a very, like, it was a hard couple years because, like, I was like, I know I'm a good person. I know I'm a real dude at this point. Like, I've been tested, like, all over the world and, you know, on every level of survival. And, but I'm not getting anything out of it. Like, nobody's, like, there's no reciprocity in the scene. It was, like, very closed, man. And that's why, like, people that are trying to make it in LA in music, it's fucking tough. Because there's so much talent. It's like, and there's a lot of mediocrity, but it's like you have to have something unique about yourself, because you can't just be like, today it's a little different, as you know, like you could just be this YouTube anomaly.
It is different than it was before YouTube broke, absolutely.
Right.
But I remember at the time, like the time that you're talking about trying to break into the quote unquote scene, and let's be honest, like our fucking scene never really went anywhere. Like no one that was directly involved in our scene really ever took off fully. Well, Jonathan, Dumbfounded, is like, he's doing it. He's doing the damn thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? But like, I don't think anybody that we like really in that scene ever got signed or like really fucking had a hit. You know,
Syra now.
Well, yeah, Syra, yeah, definitely. She's on her way up. Absolutely, working with Skrillex and everything. But yeah, so this scene was so like, we were so self-involved. But yeah, people would always ask like, "Hey man, how can I get involved in the LA scene?" And I'd be like, you know, you just have to be a fucking cool person that people want to be around, and that's all it was, because none of us were like doing anything like other than just we got along with each other or we didn't.
You just had to be there all the time.
You had to be around all the time. You had to be a familiar face, and you had to like not be thirsty, basically. Like you couldn't be the fucking kid going, "Oh, hey man, will you listen to my tape?" It's like you just had to be a fucking normal person.
That was basically what paid off. I think was just like my stick-to-itiveness and like. You know, my willingness to play Urban Underground every Friday for a year, you know, and like I wouldn't recommend that to anyone, but that's what I was like, all right, I got to do something, man. Like I need to play. That's the only thing that's keeping me sane. And like I was working on enough projects in the studio at that point that I was like, I just want to play live shows. That's what I like. That's always been my favorite thing. And like. I think for like there was 2 years where I was playing at least like 4 times a month in LA, and that was like that's what became where people started like, oh yeah, I heard of that dude.
Yeah, at the time before like this new wave of the internet shit started cracking, it was like if you weren't playing shows, you weren't doing shit. Right. Playing shows was like, man, your shit was cracking.
You had to get out there.
If there was promoters that wanted to put you on a flyer every weekend, then you were doing it.
And that was like the thing. It was, how many flyers are you on this month? And who are you on the flyers with?
And I almost feel it's the opposite nowadays.
Yeah, now it's like don't play shows.
Yeah, it's like only play shows if you know people are going to show up and shit.
Yeah, and it's going to be cracking as fuck. But, you know, it was that attitude and that, I think that willingness of artists to like, that those are the people that are still around. Mm-hmm. And like, it's cool now because like we were talking, me and Serp were talking about this the other night, and I was saying, we were talking about the swim team specifically, and I was saying a lot of those dudes were successful, and he was saying, you know, well, no, if we're talking about like financial success, and I said, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about they're still relevant in the scene, like Open Mike Eagle, Satire. Granted, Dumbfounded's probably had the most like commercial success or you know, like financial success, but the people that are still respected and still pushing the envelope as far as their craft is concerned,
they always stuck with it.
Yeah, and I'm like, that for me, that's what I wanted. So I was basically telling him, I said, I believe that I'm a success. And because when I was fucking in 2001, you know, opening for fucking the Living Legends, like I wouldn't have really thought like I would be collaborating with any of them on like a peer-to-peer level, you know. And like fast forward 10 years later,
you're in the same crew with Lucky.
Yeah, I'm in the crew with Lucky. I rapped on some of Eli's beats, you know, and it's like that, having those experiences for me was like, I've toured the country like a few times over. You know, I've had fans come to me in different states and be like, you know, I've had those experiences where I'm like, as an artist, like that was all I wanted. Like AC Alone disrespected me at the Whiskey A Go-Go in 1997, you know, and was like, get the fuck out of here, kid. Like, you're whack. And I was like, damn, dude, like, I fucking loved you, bro. Like, I
have like, very similar experiences.
You know, like, I was like, fuck, man, like, you know, Book of Human Language, man, fucking all balls no bounce, bro. Like, you know, inner city griots, like
Sunspot Jones did the same fucking thing to me in like 2000.
Dude, Idea fucking dissed me the hardest than anybody ever dissed me. And that's where you're learning how to be like respectful and not thirsty, like you were talking about. Like, because I'm giving Idea my CD at a show he's playing with Atmosphere on the God Loves Ugly tour. And it's like, you have to be respectful. Like, that's his moment. Idea and Abilities are killing it. Like, they want to shine in their show. They don't want to be, getting CDs from you.
I think one of the things, and I know that you'll agree with me on this, one of the biggest mistakes that every single young artist makes, because I did it, you did it, everyone does it, is like trying to get your music to your favorite artists, because your favorite artist is still trying to fucking make it as well. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, they can't help you yet. I wish I could help everybody that fucking gave me a CD or sent me an MP3, but like, you just can't, because I'm still trying to get myself on.
Right, exactly. And I think allowing people to have their time, like, it's like, I didn't understand that. Like, I'm like, I just handed Idea my CD. How come he's using it as a drink coaster? Yeah. You know? But it's like, bro, he's signing posters. He's blowing up right now, like, you know, and, you know, allow these people to have their moment. It's like, because if everybody's coming at you like, what can you do for me? And that's a big thing with battling today, is like, I can't go anywhere in the battling community without kids that want to talk to me about their battling career. And it's like, I'm not really interested in you, you know, like, no disrespect, but like, I only watch my battles, bro. Yeah. Like, because I'm so self-obsessed. Like, you know, like, I'm not going to watch yours. Like, if you send me the link on Facebook, like, 9 out of 10 times, I'm not even going to watch it. You know, the only thing I still do is, like, I'll listen to CDs that people hand me, and that's usually just to see how whack they are, and then, like, you know, discard them.
The freeway test?
Yeah. And it's like, and then a few times, like, fucking, I get one, and I'm like, damn, this fool was rapping his ass off. Like, me and Serp were listening to this kid, Quasar, from Rhyme Fighters, and, it's a dude I've seen around for years, you know, but I never really, like, listened to his CD. And then I got it in Santa Barbara at some show, and that shit's tight, you know. It's like, and it's like, it's just an example of, like, that one time you listen to a CD and you're like, damn, I should have listened to this fool the first time he handed me his CD, you know. But it's a crazy scene, man.
I hadn't seen you in like a while. I hadn't seen you in like a year or something, maybe. And then I got a text message from a number I didn't recognize, like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And I'm like, "Who is this?" And you said, "Hey, it's Cadalack Ron. You know, I'm back, and I'm here, and I'm doing right, and I'm just like contacting everyone that I haven't talked to in a while."
Right.
What was the route to where you're at right now?
Right about like 2011. This is like where I wish the battle rap podcast had taken the direction, because like my role in the destruction of like Grind Time and like the, you know, like that to me was like so epic.
So hold on, the other podcast he's talking about is James No Can Do and Jeff Weiss have a podcast on Earwolf called Shots Fired. And actually, I listened to that one with Avocado on the way back from my last video shoot. And that inspired me to invite you to do my podcast, because I was like, man, I feel like they didn't let Caddy talk enough, and that motherfucker's interesting as shit. And so that's why I invited him on.
Yeah, so like, because like that's something like I think people like, they don't like to like, they don't want to like stir up things with me or have a conversation I'm not going to like or something. And, you know, but it's like there was a lot of weird politics involved. But basically, like, I became the manager of Grind Time West Coast, and this was like 2011 after Lush stepped down, and he basically was like, I was thrown from gaining respect in the scene and getting involved in battling, and then ultimately having the shows in Santa
You were helping
Monica.
a lot behind the scenes already, anyways,
Right.
booking venues and stuff.
Sure,
right?
and then I started throwing my own battle events, kind of taking the place of Bar Exam, where there was that void left when Satire was running Bar Exam. And like, I was basically doing these tryout battles, and then Lush was like, yo, you know, why don't you become the manager of the West Coast? And like, you know, you can like revive the West Coast. And I was like, it would have been a perfect, great idea, you know, but like I had just relapsed on heroin, and I vaguely sensed that this wasn't like the brightest idea in the world. But like, having been battling for 2 years, and like, you know, that was like a huge, to be asked to run the West, that was like the West was the best division. So how are you going to say like, no, like I'm not in a position to do that?
What made you relapse?
I don't, man, you know, I relapsed at the Gooch video shoot. And I don't know if you've seen the video, but it's like me and my girlfriend, and like, you know, shouts out to Jill, I love her. And, you know,
What's up, Jill?
Hey, Jill. What's up, girl? I'm going to take you to the fair, girl. We're going to the carnival this weekend, girl. But, like, it was just like this whole, we were fucking with Ever Ready Records, and, like, that was a whole, I don't know what.
That's a whole nother story.
That's just so weird.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, there was, like, these kids, and they're like, we're going to pay for your video.
They had some money.
And, you know, hey, come to the Roosevelt Hotel, and, you know, you're signed to Ever Ready now. And I was like, okay, I never signed anything, but all right, like, and, you know, my girlfriend and me, like, my new girlfriend, and, like, you know, my whole life, everything was going great, and it's like, we're at this video shoot, there's girls kissing girls, and, like, Ted Nugent's daughter, and, like, you know, free alcohol, and, like, we're in the David Bowie room, and, like, something about, like, everything just, like, going so well, where I was kind of like, damn, this was more than I ever had hoped for as an artist, like, to be having other people produce my videos and shit. So, you know, I took a pill, you know, I took a little piece of a Suboxone, and, or, you know, it's buprenorphine. It's like a pretty powerful opioid. And I got super faded. And then, the next time I had a battle, my nerves were kind of going a little. So I popped a little piece of a pill and fucking just chilled. And, you know, ultimately, I think I spent my 30th birthday like shooting heroin in New York City.
Wow.
And, you know, just locked in the Holiday Inn in the financial district, fucking. And I went there to do a battle, but, and that was like when people were like, oh, like, what happened to Ron in that battle? It was like kind of weird. Like,
So you still showed up?
yeah, I showed up, but I couldn't remember my shit. I wasn't really all there. Yeah. You know, I spent most of like 4 days in a hotel room shooting heroin in New York City. Then right after that, Lush is like, hey, you should run the West Coast grind time. And I was like, oh, all right. And, you know, I couldn't pull it off, basically. The short version is, like, I fucked off some sponsorship opportunities from people, like, giving me money. And, you know, and none of this was, like, malicious or intentional. It was just, like, I got a serious drug problem. And people are handing me, you know, thousands of dollars in cash. I was booking tours still. Like, I was riding on the fact that my name was solid and good, and I was able to get advances for a tour I was putting together. And, you know, when you're getting a $1,500 guarantee with a $750 advance, you know, I was just spending the advances before I even went on tour. And then I didn't even go on tour. So then people are like, really quickly, you know, then I fucked up a whole big event up north at Oakland. And, you know, basically it was like, that was like, and now I joke about it. I'm like, you know, that's how important I am, that like when I fucked up, I like ruined like other people's lives. But it's not really funny. But
what was the moment where it was like, I got to clean my shit up again?
I tried to go back to treatment. Like last year, my second son was born in October, and I wasn't doing well at all, you know, and I had to like.
You got real skinny again, didn't you?
Yeah.
How thin were you? What did you get down to?
I think I get down to like 140. Yeah, and like I can lose weight like nothing, you know. On drugs, it's like I think I could drop like 30 pounds in like.
But I mean, your normal walk around weight has got to be at least 175.
170, yeah.
That's a lot of weight to lose.
Oh, I lose it so fast, like, you know, it's just like ridiculous. And you know, my girl, bless her heart, you know, like she was doing good, and she was like fucking, you know, she had the baby, and I had to go back to the rehab and just like fuck, you know. Try and get myself cleaned up again.
That's good. At least there was no jail stint or anything that caused that. It was just
no,
your own choice.
And that's miraculous, man. Because like in the process, like the thing is, like people, and I'm gonna say this probably just once, you know, but like the thing is how people joke about me being a drug addict, and like how that's how they attack me in the battles, and there's all this like, and I play it up, you know, Black Tar Rap
the
Star,
character,
the Methadone Don, but like the fact is that like this is like the only time I'll be serious about drug addiction, but like chemical dependency is like really fucked up. And like I've died like numerous times. I've seen like really close friends of mine die. You know, I've been involved in like fatal car crashes. I've seen this shit destroy my family. You know, like I've seen it destroy me like numerous times. And like I think the only way that I've survived is through maintaining like this levity about it, and being. Once I get cleaned up, then I laugh about everything and put it out there. And I'm like, I'm not ashamed of it, you know, but for anybody that thinks that I don't take this shit really seriously is like tripping, because
it's like you have to laugh about it, not to let it fucking destroy you.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent so many fucking days like in these institutions, like fucking, or rehabs or hospitals, or like faced with like, you know, potentially like life-threatening things happening to me. And it's like, waking up from overdoses with catheters in your dick and fucking not knowing how you got there, and having the police looking for you for like shit that you don't even remember doing. And, you know, it's like, you know, like not being able to be at the birth of your first child or your second child, because you're strung out, is like, this is all shit that like will never go away from you, and the pain that like remains is very true. And I think the only way that I can process it, like I wasn't present at the birth of my second child, and because I was on drugs, and like I never even like dealt with that. I never sat down and thought about it, or like, I never like apologized to my kid's mother and said like, I'm sorry I wasn't there, and like the other night, Serp and I are writing for this project, and like all of a sudden that's the verse that I write, and it's like fucking, that's like full circle life issue, reality, music. It's like, and the next day I was able to, because of art, basically, like, and walking through that emotion, and then I seen my girlfriend the next day, who's my kid's mom, and sat down with her at a table and said, I wrote a verse last night about our son or whatever, and then explaining to her the verse in a way for me was like being able to tell her like I was sorry, and that's just how this shit works, man. It's like fucking. So it is like the darkness that surrounds the art is like all encompassing and always there. But, ultimately what happened was like I got out of treatment last year, and, I ended up relapsing again after a short period of time. And like it was extremely like serious relapse. That's like I didn't show up for Vendetta, which was this huge event that they had booked me for. And it wasn't like I don't want to show up. It wasn't like, it was at that point, it was like, dude, like it's been both ways now. People have seen Cadalack like do good, and people have also seen me like fall. And to fall any further was just too much of like, I just was like, I'm not coming, like I don't like, it would be worse for me to show up like this than to just not show up, because I don't want to add any fuel to the fire.
I think people do care about you in that scene, and it probably would have been fucking painful to see you that way, to like really be. People wouldn't have felt good seeing you that way.
And it's funny you say that, because like there was a post on Rap Music, and it was like, does Cadalack Ron need an intervention? Yeah. And like it was actually a fan who was like, hey guys, like I know we joke a lot about Caddy, but like the last few battles he really hasn't looked good, and something's like obviously going on. Like what should we do? Yeah. Like, and then a lot of the fans were like, oh, fuck Caddy, like I hope his children die.
Right, that boards a lot of trolls.
Yeah, man. But like there was a few people like, yeah, I've been worried about him, like he's not looking good. And I think a lot of my friends had no experiences with me like when I was using, because I was clean for a number of years. And it was like, it was, again, it's like you don't want to have to tell someone like, what to do. But I think, and then, last summer basically was like fucking, I ended up in the hospital like with some very serious problems. And it was just faced with the like, I just couldn't stop, man. That was like the hardest thing was like, and I think people don't understand that about like drug addiction is like the worst place like an addict can be is like when you really want to stop, and like you're not enjoying it, like it's not fun, like you're in the fucking hospital, your girlfriend just left you, like your kids aren't in your life, like nobody's coming to visit, and you just can't stop getting high. And at that point you're like, that's where I was like sitting in a hospital room in some medical center in fucking the Valley, not even knowing how I got there, having the doctor tell me I have some like crazy blood infection from something. I got IVs all over, and fucking, I'm still like the last person I know, I'm still like trying to have them bring me drugs to the hospital. Wow. And then, like fucking, and that's when I was like, dude, I really can't stop. Like this was like, and it was just like torture because I had been sober for years. So it was like, it was like dangling the carrot. It was like, yo, like, haha, like, remember when your life was good? And like, it's like all of a sudden everything was just fucking. And then, I ended up like, luckily my family like fucking came through for me. And that was a hard thing for them to do because they had basically written me off as far as like my life had gotten back together, but as far as like, enabling or helping or whatever you call it, like they were pretty hard lined, like tough love, like
as soon as you start again, you're out of our family again.
Yeah, like you figure it out, and like, I will plug this program called Music Cares. It's the Musicians Assistance Program. It's actually run by the Recording Academy through the Grammys. Yeah. And, if you're like an impaired musician or an artist, like specifically working in the music field, sound engineering, whatever, and you need help, like they actually will like pay for you to go to treatment. Oh, no shit. Yeah, and it's like they'll pay for you to go to sober living, like they'll fucking help you, dude. And so like if anybody was listening that was dealing with any issues like with chemical dependency, fucking the Music Cares program through the Recording Academy they like saved my life basically. Like they gave me like $11,000 and put me in a detox and fucking got me squared away.
How did you find out about the Music Cares program?
We were doing like the Grind Time shit on Warped Tour like a couple years ago, and they had a booth, and like a friend of mine was working at the booth, who was a musician that I respect, and they kind of were like talking about it, and I was like I had known that they were clean, and so when shit was getting like real hectic, basically I reached out to them, and they put me in touch with the woman named Shireen who directs the program, and they just were like, like the same day I called, they were like, yeah, we can help you out. And this was crazy fucking, I was like literally like at death's door, like, and I was like leaving this hotel on like Venice and La Brea, and I was walking up the street, and I just like robbed a house the night before, and I had like this bag, this like Louis Vuitton like luggage, like full of like all this stolen shit, and I had a pistol in my waistband, and I had like my pockets full of like drugs, and I'm walking up the street, and like I'm the only dude I know that gets pulled over like on foot, so like the police are driving by me, and they just fucking, it's like 11 a.m. They flip a Yui and fucking come back, and they told me to sit down on the bus stop, and I was like, fuck, like I'm a fucking felon, and I'm like in like all kinds of violation, and I'm sitting on this fucking bus stop, and I knew that I was going to prison for like ever, and like I was just like, fuck, man. And this is like I'm like I do have faith in some sort of like higher power, and for whatever reason, like the cops didn't search me. Wow. And I was sitting there like, and I had already like resigned myself to the fact that I was busted like at least 5 years, and they let me go without even searching me. And so right after that, Music Cares called me.
Were you high?
Oh, I was fucked up. Yeah. And but like for some reason when I'm high, like I talk to the cops like so well that like, like I always like just fucking manage to like get out of it somehow. Yeah, like I just talk to them really well and respectful, and they're like, I've had a lot of instances with police where they were like, just let me walk away, and like I thought like for sure I was fucked. And right after that, I mean, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that I just got away. And Music Cares calls me, and they're like, yo, we have a bed for you in a detox, like you have to get there today. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. I was like, I'll be there, because I was like, this is like God working in my life. And yeah, I mean, they paid for everything, detox, fucking 30 days in rehab, fucking, and that's definitely what it took for me to like, get back to having a desire to want to like live again.
Tell the people what you're doing right now, because I think it's very noble.
I'm working right now for a nonprofit agency in Culver City, and they basically, like, all we do is refer people to self-help programs. And so people call in all day and like have various life issues, and we get them like connected to referrals for self-help. the big thing that we do is like they operate a collaborative housing program, and it's basically dealing with people that like haven't been able to live in any other type of environment, and putting them in touch with homeowners that are in line with our like principles, and like allowing them to live in like a family environment where they feel supported and feel like, you know, attending some sort of self-help group, whether it's like a dual diagnosis like mental health group or Alcoholics Anonymous or some other 12-step program. And the idea is that people that have issues that get involved in self-help like are less likely to go back to the hospital. They're more likely to be med compliant. Like we were talking about earlier, this idea that they're helping themselves. That's why it's self-help, you know.
Because when you are suffering from like schizophrenia, bipolar, and you're self-medicating with heroin or whatever, it's like if a doctor tells you take these meds, you don't trust the doctor.
Right. And it's like typically like the humans just don't respond to authority, and they don't respond to like being told what to do. And so when you allow somebody to feel like it's self-generated, like they're helping themselves because they want to get help, or they see other people around them that have overcome similar issues, you know, that's like the main, they build a trust. And generally like somebody that has had like a similar experience to an individual like that can win their trust when like a social worker won't be able to do that.
So when a guy like you is in the office that's in, you know, that's tattoos on the hands, that knows what's up, it says like, hey man, this will work for you. It's a lot better than somebody in a suit and tie.
Right, because I'm not saying this will work for you because I read that it'll work for you. I'm saying this will work for you because it worked for me. And like I'm saying I benefited, like my life changed as a result of my involvement in like 12-step programs. Right. The only reason I'm alive today basically is because there's a community of people that have dealt with issues like myself, and they helped me out, you know, and that's what we do. And like that's why like a big part of the job is like within the first few minutes of talking to someone, you have to disclose to them your personal information, not detailed, but generally you have to let them know I understand, and like I've been there. Like, you know, and if you want to get specific, you know, you could say, yeah, I've dealt with that. You know, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to have a family member that's strung out, or I know what it's like to be strung out, or I know what it's like to be locked in a psych ward, or like, I know what it's like to not get jobs because you're a felon, you know, and then you build this rapport with somebody, and that's how you develop trust with an individual, because they're like, okay, you're not coming at me like the judge or the PO, you're coming at me like just as a peer. And it's all peer-to-peer, and that leaves room for somebody to feel like they're helping themselves, because it's like, all right, if they can do it, I can do it, and what do I have to lose? I'll try this out and see what happens.
Going way back to earlier, you mentioned the first time that you were involved in the court system when the girl got her jaw broke, that you just didn't feel anything about it. Now that you're clean, sober, living life again, it seems like your life is in a positive place right now. You've got your family around you. You know, you got a good lady, your kids. Are you feeling right now?
Yeah. And that's something like that. Again, it took like a long time. It definitely allows you to operate in like this kind of like numbness, you know, where you just kind of are disassociated. And if you've dealt with issues your whole life, like, I never really felt like a part of or accepted, or like my self-esteem was always kind of low. And it's like, you know, then you end up seeking lower companions and seeking like a life that, you know, not living up to your potential and just kind of under-earning. And ultimately, like, I recreated myself as somebody that like I wasn't intended to be, you know, like I was probably on this trajectory for, you know, being like a real estate agent or like a businessman. You know, and it's like I worked hard at like breaking myself down to being like this like fucking criminal felon who like has a totally twisted outlook on life, who has seen like horrible things happen to people. And that's another thing too. Like, I mean, I think like personally, like I deal with like some elements of like PTSD, because like I think if you lived in like the downtown LA area and you've been on the streets, like it's like war. It's like going to battle, you know, and like you can't talk about this shit to normal people, without kind of joking about it, because nobody really understands what that's like. Like, I can't sit at dinner. My parents don't want to hear about it because it's terrifying. You know, like, I can't talk about, like, seeing people die or seeing someone get shot or, like, watching someone get beaten to death, you know, or me getting beaten to, like, within an inch of my life in an alley behind $5 of dope, you know. And, like, when you talk about things like that, people are turned off or afraid of you. And, you know, kind of getting to a point where you, like, find the people that you can kind of relate to on that. And, like, that's why, again, like, this all comes back to art for me, because that's been the only place that I could really tell the truth, you know? Mm-hmm. And, like, I don't write anything that isn't true. You know, like, I moved from, like, writing about other people's lives to, like, writing about my own. And that's, like, where I'm at with everything now. And I think the feelings have come back to the point where it's, like, mainly, like, I appreciate being alive. And, you know, like, I actually enjoy, like, yesterday, I just had this moment where I'm sitting with my girlfriend and, my 2 sons and a few dogs, like, watching TV. And, like, that's something, like, I never thought that I would be able to experience. You know, like, I never thought that I would be, like, happy or be able to, like, just enjoy being with people. And, like, you know, just taking my kids to the park, you know, like, that's, like, such a small triviality that people would take for granted. But it's, like, for me, that's a huge deal. It's, like, you know, like, being trusted to, like, take care of your children, you know, or, like, having people respect you enough where they, like, think you're a good person again. But also just to appreciate, like, life. And, like, you know, you're talking about appreciating the beauty of life through LSD. Like, today, like, I can just look at everything and be like, you know, I think everything is awesome, you know. And especially if you've made it out of the darkness, to get back to, like, a place where you can appreciate the light, you know. And then seeing others, like, glad that you're back, you know. Like, that's been, and that's, like, I give a big kudos to, like, the artistic community in LA, because the general sentiment of people that I had interacted with for years when I'm doing well is, like, we're really glad that you're doing well because we know you're a good person, and, like, you know, we're happy to see you not dead. And, you know, I think just, like, a couple weeks ago, I saw Lush at some event, and he had eaten, like, a lot of Molly. And if Lush, listen, I don't care. Yeah. Lush eats Molly, you know. And he was, like, you know, almost in tears, like, you know, off the Molly, obviously. But, like, he was like, bro, like, I basically had, like, written you off. Like, just expected you to die. And I had to prepare myself emotionally for, like, the fact that you were going to, like, be gone. And, like, you know, and hearing people say that shit to you, and, like, especially your parents or your brothers, or, you know, I have children, and, like, you know, being back in their lives and, like, being a dad, like, that's, like, the most important thing I can do.
And I would say, like, going back to earlier, that definitely makes you a success as well.
Absolutely. And, like, I think also, like, my definition of success has, like, changed and evolved so much, where it's like today being successful means being accountable, showing up for your kids, being responsible, having a job. You know, if music isn't providing all the money that I need, then I need to be working full time. And that's something, like, that I, you know, like, I don't go and do a show out of state unless it's going to make more money than I would have made staying at home working. You know what I mean? And, like, that's where I'm at. And that doesn't mean I'm any less of a musician, because I'm not, you know, fully self-supporting from music. Music has been a great supplemental income. And, you know, there's those times where you do a show and make a lot of money and you're like, fuck, like, but, you know, like, I think, and I talked about this, anybody who says they're succeeding financially through music, like, the first question I want to ask them is, like, do you have health insurance? And if you're like, yeah, you know, then I'm like, that's awesome. You know, like, yeah, you're succeeding. You're like, if you just pay the rent and, like, that's it. Like, a lot of us do have children and families and fucking real life shit going on. And, taking responsibility for that today is, like, my main priority, you know. And I could honestly, like, I could walk away from the scene, you know, like, I'll never walk away from music, and I'll never fucking stop being an artist. And like I basically turned my life into art, you know. And like my conception of what art is that it's everything. You know, I'm not here to debate fucking anything about art. Like I consider myself like a living work of art, and as cliche as that sounds or weird, it's like all the shit that I've done to like, you know, through tattooing or the way I dress or who I've become is like, you know, that's just this ongoing, evolving art piece, you know. And then a big thing that I've had to deal with is like learning when that stops and when the real life starts, and like having this other persona of Cadalack Ron, the rapper, and Robert Paulson, the father and the employee, you know, the duality's been confusing at times, because it's like, it's hard for me not to want to tell everyone in the workplace, like, hey, like I have these videos on YouTube that like I have fans, like I've done this. I came in second place in this Red Bull battle. Like, you know, people know who I am in some small circles of the world. Like, but it's like, that's not my job, you know, like, and, you know, there's times too where I'm like, fuck, I hope my kids never like go watch my fucking battles on YouTube or like, you know, right. But that's also the legacy that I leave as an artist. And it's like, I'm not ashamed of that. And, I think, but, you know, being myself, the man first, is like today is much more important than the artist, because the artist has a tendency to like kill me. And like my dad's even said to me like, yo, Cadalack Ron is going to kill you, you know, and like being able to understand that like when I go home, I'm Robert Paulson, you know, when I'm in the streets, I'm Cadalack Ron, you know, when I'm doing shows or networking or whatever. But it's like people respect me. They don't, you know. And the reason my name is still Thorough is because of who I am, you know.
Well, hey, man, thank you for coming in.
All day, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Tell the people real quick where to find you on Twitter.
At Cadalack Ron, CADALACKRON. My Bandcamp is caddyron.com, CADDYRON.com. And the crew website is maquinamuerte.com. You know, and all of our shit's up there, so...
I really appreciate the conversation, man. Thank you so much.
All day, brother. Thank you.